The 2018 congressional elections are a year and a half away, but Republican House Speaker Paul Ryan of Janesville already has drawn 4 opponents, 1 primary challenger, and 3 Democrats looking to unseat him in November of 2018. Ryan's latest challenger is a high school English teacher who serves on the Janesville School Board. Kathy Myers is a candidate for the 1st District congressional seat, and she joins us now on Up Front. Kathy Myers, it's good to have you on the program.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So in your campaign announcement video, you referred to Paul Ryan as a neighbor because Janesville, you said, is kind of a smaller community. He's a neighbor. So why are you running against your neighbor?
Well, I'm running against my neighbor because I think he hasn't been very neighborly in a way. One of the biggest issues that got me into the race was health care. I have pre-existing conditions. I would imagine almost everybody listening or watching has pre-existing conditions, and the plan that he proposed would eliminate that. And as a matter of fact, yesterday I met a young man, actually earlier this week, but yesterday we went to Senator Johnson's office, a young man named Jack with a devastating pre-existing condition. He has a genetic disease that requires infusions, every other week, and without those, he literally dies. And so we made a point of running a petition. We got over 1,600 signatures, and we delivered that to Senator Johnson, asking him to vote against the Senate bill, and we would ask, of course, wish that Congressman Ryan would not have proposed the House bill the way he did. Do
you think the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare needs fixing? Are there things that need to be addressed?
I think so. Actually, I support single payer. Okay. I think that the ACA was a step in the right direction, but I believe that health care is a right. And therefore, I believe that you should always be able to go to the doctor, that it shouldn't bankrupt you in order to do that. And, there's a difference. People like to talk about privileges a lot, as healthcare is a privilege. I think your driver's license is a privilege because you have to take a test for that. Your healthcare should be just because you were born or going to be born. And I think that that is a right.
I want to talk a little bit about the fact that you will have a primary, and right now we have at least 3 Democrats in that primary. You've got Dave Yankovich, who hasn't run for office before, moved here from Ohio to run. You've got Randy Bryce, who has run for office before and has gotten some buzz from a video that he put out in his original announcement. How do you differentiate yourself in what was likely to be a very competitive primary?
Well, these 2 gentlemen are very nice people, and they are, we agree on many things. I think one thing that differentiates me from the others is the fact that I'm an elected official.
You've won elections?
That I have won twice. I'm on the Janesville School Board. I was top vote getter each time. And so I understand about being in a situation where you have to govern, not just run. And so I've worked with people from a variety of backgrounds in order to be successful in that, and make policy and do things that are in the best interests of Janesville students. There are a couple of other issues that I'm running on too that maybe differentiate me. One happens to be the environment. I am not a supporter of the expansion of the Enbridge pipeline, which runs through the First CD. That pipeline has been being developed piecemeal, and it's been done without a lot of opposition. The way that they are doing it, they are expanding it to carry tar sands oil. It's going to be huge, and I really think that pipelines and our dependence on oil and non-renewable energy is just not forward-thinking enough. I think that we need to be expanding and really putting our efforts into renewable energy and sustainable energy. And so that differentiates me from the opposition, which is not as strong, I think, on this issue.
How do you take on somebody like Paul Ryan, who, as you say, is a powerful guy? He will have, as I've said to other candidates, a lot of money to put into this race. He has not had a close election since he's been elected to office. How do you take that on?
Well, first of all, I want to talk about a positive message. I want to talk about what I'm for, not what I'm against, and I think that will resonate with people. I'm going to be who I am, and I'm not going to shy away from talking about those things. And I think that I'm an average person that understands what average people go through, and I think that people will understand that authenticity and support me in that way. That's not one way that I can do this. And I want to give you some perspective. Okay, if I had $1 for every hardworking American that Paul Ryan would kick off of health care, I would win this race. I can win this race with that dollar from each one of those people. So I really believe that there's all sorts of political currency out there. And yes, there's monetary political currency, and that's incredibly important. But I also believe in the power of people to make change. And I think that that is going to be key in this race.
Kathy Myers is one of the Democrats running in the 1st Congressional District against House Speaker Paul Ryan. Thanks for your time today. We appreciate it.
I really appreciate being here.
Coming up next on Up Front, as we near the 4th of July holiday, just how optimistic are we about our nation's future?